Hello, people of the internet. Ian, also the Freedom Astrologer here, and doing another one of those videos. And this one is again of the series Spiritual Awakening through Astrology, and we're going through different phases, different kind of phases we go through the spiritual journey or the spiritual awakening journey, and we're going to use a little bit of astrology, the stars, basically, to kind of also illustrate what's happening and what to look out for in charts. And also I'm going to describe, the phases a little bit, what to expect during these phases. And now we're already, if you haven't, watched the previous first two videos, first two phases, I recommend you go look at them before you start watching this one. You get a better idea what these videos are about. But generally speaking, we're doing a lot about spiritual awakening, astrology, and kind of like the different levels of these journeys. Now we're on to phase 3. So phase 3, we're literally through now the worst of it. Let's put it that way. Remember, in the first two videos we talked a little bit or a lot about crises and Pluto and transformation and burning through the old and letting go of the old and kind of having these crises and difficult situations in our lives. And now we're getting to the phase where that starts to end. Now, in the previous videos, I mentioned the ruler of the first house, or the ruler of the ascendant. I brought an example here into this video where you can see the ruler here is Sagittarius, or the first house sign, and then the ascendant is a Sagittarius, and the ruler is Jupiter, which is in the 8th house. Remember, guys, when we're talking about spiritual awakenings, we're talking a lot about and then crisis and transformation, which very often leads to spiritual awakening. We're very often talking about the 8th house. Now as you can see, the ruler of the ruler of the first has been in this 8th house for a while. So this can already indicate that in that person's life, that year has been quite transformational. There have been most likely at least some crisis in their lives, and now if they're open to it, now what starts happening is the ruler of the first starts to end its transit in the kind of house, in the difficult 8th house, which is to do with a lot of those crisis things we already mentioned a lot. Now it's ending its stint here in the 8th house, and it's starting to come into the 9th house. Before we go into the 9th house, I want to mention a little bit about the ruler of the first and the kind of transformational nature of different signs, because right now you can see that Sagittarius, we have in the example we have Sagittarius. So for Sagittarius, the ruler Jupiter, changes signs usually once a year, maybe once or twice a year, usually. Now, depending on retrograde, it can differ a little bit, but still, it moves, looking and comparing to the faster moving celestial bodies we have, it moves quite slowly. So, for example, if you are ruled by the moon, let's say you're a Cancer ascendant, so that means you're ruled by the moon. If you're new to rulership, please go and watch my rulership video. I did a short one on that as well. But let's say you are moon ruled. The moon moves or changes signs approximately every 2.5 days. So that's really quickly. So imagine, this is one of the reasons why Cancers can be quite moody, because they experience these natural cycles of life, these natural movements of life very rapidly, very quickly. It's very kind of cyclical, very almost up and down, because moon moves really quickly, and moon moves really quickly into the 8th house and out of the 8th house. That's what we're talking about right now as well, and into the 9th house for them. So it, in a month they are actually going through these kind of like transformational cycles. And if we look at other planets, Mercury moves really quickly, Sun moves really quickly. So if you're ruled by Mercury or Sun, again, these transformational cycles, they kind of we can say these mini cycles within the bigger cycles happen to you, let's say, more often. Now, if you move further down the line in the kind of like the planetary sense, Mars, now we get to Mars. Venus also moves very quickly, but Mars doesn't, it moves quite quickly, but again, a little bit more slowly. And if you're ruled by Mars, you're an Aries, those cycles still are moving quite quickly, but not as up and down as, let's say, for example, the moon. If we're talking about these cycles from the perspective of the ruler of the first and the ascendant, and remember, guys, please go back and look at the other videos, because I did mention a lot of other aspects to look out for as well. Now, the further we go, the slower the cycle becomes. Let's say you're Scorpio, so you're kind of ruled by both. You're ruled by the Mars, so one cycle is quite quick, and the other cycle is very, very, very slow. It's the Pluto, because you're ruled by Pluto as well. So that transformation, let's say Pluto, your ascendant ruler, steps into the 8th. You're kind of on a transformational journey anyway as a Scorpio ascendant, but now it takes a really long, like 20, 25 years, 21 years to be in that house. So imagine that type of transformation. Now, the good side of this is obviously when it steps into the 9th house, which we're going to talk about really soon, is you get to experience that transit a little bit longer as well. Now, I don't want to make it seem like 8th house is only bad and 9th house is only good. That's a very simplistic way of looking at it. But let's say from a very kind of let's say left kind of mind perspective, and kind of from a Western point of view, Western society point of view, having to go through crises and having to go through deep transformations and healings and kind of like these letting goes and people leaving your life and losing jobs and these kind of difficult things. This isn't the best from Western perspective. So this is why I'm like giving or maybe the vibe of 9th house might be a little bit better. So in our example, let's go back to that. In our example, the person is, they're starting to end their kind of stint in those 8th house energies, which is transformation, which is spiritual Kundalini awakenings. There's lots happening there. And the person is, already starting to become aware through all those crises, through all those transformations, because 8th house, remember, and Scorpio and Pluto, these are all also very deep, esoteric kind of energetic energy as well, because these are things that we don't really talk about in the mainstream. These are powers, these are capabilities that we don't usually use in the modern school system or universities. These are hidden things, and through these transformations people start looking for other means of help. First and foremost, these deeper, maybe therapists, deeper guides, deeper astrologers, deeper counselors, and then they're kind of these themes of astrology, tantra, numerology, whatever deep esoteric matter that is not really talked about a lot, comes to their path, and they start to become aware of these things. Now, moving a little bit further now, because we are talking about phase 3 in this series now as well, and I called phase 3 the helpers, and kind of like it's also not only the helpers, but it's also like stepping from almost like the darkness into the light, because during phase 3 Now we're in this example, we're literally starting to step into phase 3, and now in this example, now the ruler of the first has stepped into the ninth house. The ninth house is a lot to do with, you know, having that bigger perspective and seeing that deeper connection, and seeing the bigger picture of why that suffering and why that transformation was even necessary. So this is one of the biggest things throughout this video, this phase 3 video, because now the person has really suffered. You know, let's not make any kind of make up any, you know, fairy tales here. The person has most likely suffered throughout, at least a little bit, throughout this 8th house experience, or a Pluto square opposition, you know, conjunction. And now finally they step into the ninth house. Ninth house is a lot to do with gurus, teachers, helpers in general, mentor figures, father figures. And now finally these people start to kind of emerge. Of course, in the 8th house, these let's say more deeper healers are there as well to kind of guide a person, you know, through the difficulty. But now, you know, these ninth house people are more like also, they're kind of like maybe help to see why it was necessary for the person to kind of go through those difficulties. They help to see why it was necessary. Now the person starts to open up themselves as well, and starts to kind of first and foremost connect, I would say, as well to the higher realms, to the higher wisdom. A certain kind of power starts to emerge from within, from deep within, because when you go through a lot of suffering and pain and difficulty, usually if you really go through it and you take, you know, the lessons with you, you become stronger, you become more whole as a person. And this is now in the ninth house, you start to see your power, you start to feel it, you start to understand these capabilities. These guys, mentors, kind of come in and they start supporting you more. They start to show you what you're capable of. They kind of you know, obviously the Jupiter, or kind of like the first house in the first, the ruler of the first in the ninth house, is a very more of like an optimistic endeavor anyway. So lot of seeing the big picture, seeing kind of like almost making sense of your suffering, making sense of why it was necessary, making also sense through the helpers, through the guides, through the mentors, the kind of lucky coincidence, because it is a very lucky house. Seeming coincidences, because it's still more about, you know, the guides, the helpers, the mentors coming in and kind of showing you your capabilities, and kind of almost what's the word I'm looking for? Almost kind of appearing, you know, from nowhere. You know, the right person comes and kind of helps you understand, and kind of helps you figure out what you're good at, figure out why it was necessary for you to go through all of that, because they most likely have gone through at least some of that what you went through. So this is where, you know, the kind of darkness starts turning into light, and more of those kundalini openings, more of those energetic outbursts, heart openings, I would say, as well, a very important part. And you know, it is because you've gone through a lot of that kind of difficulty. It's first when you step into the night, it's kind of start picking yourself up, you know, because it is a lot. It has taken a lot of out of the person, no doubt about it, and kind of starting to create almost like a new life with this kind of grand, bigger vision for this life. And yeah, a lot of it starts already in the 8th or with Pluto, but it continues here in the 9th and in the third phase of kind of letting go of things that don't no longer serve you, you know, and really maybe weigh you down even. Let's put it that way. And these things start, you will start to have that bigger picture, and then it will be easier to kind of let these things go, and oh, this is why I needed to let go, kind of this type of perspective. Now we are now almost with our journey into the kind of fourth phase. I'm giving you already a little bit about the fourth phase of this matter as well, but I'm going to keep the fourth phase a little bit of a secret for now, and let's talk about the phase 4 really soon in the next video. Also the Freedom Astrologer out for now. Thank you for watching, listening. I really hope you got something out of this video, and if you're going through this specific phase, it is, from a mind perspective, usually more of an optimistic phase in the spiritual awakening journey. So see you soon in the next video.